Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news update video. We saw 8 signings, 4 I never got around to touching on yesterday, 4 that happened earlier today involving the Boston Bruins and the New York Islanders as well as the Buffalo Sabres. And we saw a very interesting deal involving the Minnesota Wild and Detroit Red Wings. We'll get to all these updates from our past little while coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do it without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for tomorrow's live stream at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time talking about the free agency. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. Sorry for any background noise. There are a few things that are happening here today. But in today's video, we've got a very intriguing video. We've got 8 signings here to talk about, plus another interesting trade that involves future considerations for all things. So we're going to touch on all these things here. We'll start with the signings first. So we missed 4 signings from back over yesterday. These are all smaller end signings, so we'll touch on all of these ones here. So first, the Boston Bruins have extended left shot defenseman, 25-year-old defensive prospect Michael Callahan to a 1-year contract extension with an AAV of $775,000. Callahan had a goal in 17 NHL games. Looks like eventually could be a solid third pair guy. I think he just recently came over from the NCAA, so a very interesting signing here, league minimum for a depth guy who can play at the NHL level. Not too bad there, so a good signing there from the Bruins as they signed Callahan. Then we saw the New York Islanders sign center/right winger Liam Foudy, who's 25 years old as well. He was an RFA, gets a 1-year contract with the AAV of league minimum $775,000. Not a bad deal. Foudy this past year had no points in 2 games at the NHL level. Does have a few games of NHL experience in his career, so he knows what it takes to play at the NHL level, so he seems like he should be a solid AHL player, call-up option, could maybe a consistent 4th liner next year. So at 1 year at $775,000, not a bad deal for the Islanders as they lock up Foudy on a new extension. Then we saw the Buffalo Sabres sign one of their depth defensemen, and that's Jack Rathbone. Rathbone, who's a left shot defenseman, 26 years old, signed a 2-year contract extension in Buffalo with an AAV of $800,000. Rathbone, who at one point was a very good prospect in the Canucks organization, has been bouncing around over the past couple of years. This past year had 6 goals and 22 points in 60 games after he had 8 goals and 24 points the year prior in the Penguins AHL affiliates. So Rathbone obviously did enough to earn himself an extension. I think long term Rathbone could be like a solid depth guy, call-up option guy for the Buffalo Sabres. So a very interesting sign there from the Buffalo Sabres as they do add some more defensive depth by keeping around Jack Rathbone. And then we saw the New York Islanders also yesterday sign right winger Julien Gauthier. Gauthier, who was a low-end acquisition, I think either last offseason or the offseason prior, signs a 1-year extension with AAV of $775,000. Gauthier does, just like Rathbone, have NHL experience, but only got into 1 game this past year at the NHL level. Well, he had 3 goals and 8 points in 9 AHL games, so he didn't get very much playing time this year. I still think Gauthier could be a solid 13-14 forward, get into game action as like a bottom 6 guy, so a very smart move there from the New York Islanders as they do sign Gauthier to an extension. Then we saw the Boston Bruins extend one of their younger players earlier today. He was an RFA, he's 24 years old, center/left winger, should eventually be a solid 3rd-line player, but at this point in time, decent 4th-line guy, and that is John Beecher. Beecher signs a 1-year contract extension with an AAV of $900,000. This past year in his first career NHL season, his first full NHL season, had 3 goals and 11 points, the 11 points being a career high in 78 games for Boston. So Beecher looks like a really solid player. He got almost every single game of NHL action this year, so he looks like a pretty good prospect there for the Bruins. He got a lot of 4th-line minutes last year. I think long term he could eventually be a solid 3rd-line guy there for the Boston Bruins. So a very interesting signing there from Boston as they do wind up extending John Beecher on a decent 1-year extension. Then we saw the Boston Bruins also sign former Canucks goaltending prospect Michael DiPietro. DiPietro, who a lot of people thought would get a lot of attention in free agency, has it extended in Boston. He's 26 years old. He gets a 2-year contract extension to stay in Boston with an AAV of $813,000. This past year did not play at all at the NHL level, but did have a .927 save percentage and 2.05 GA in 39 AHL games, which was some of his better numbers in recent memories. So DiPietro looked quite good this past year, had a really solid season. It's basically a team 3rd stringer at this point in time, so a very solid pickup here for the Boston Bruins as they do sign DiPietro to a 2-year extension to remain their backup. Then we saw one of the players on the End-to-End Hockey free agent board be taken traded off of it, and that is Henry Jokiharju. Jokiharju, who was acquired at the trade deadline from the Buffalo Sabres. Right shot defenseman, 26 years old. A lot of people thought he would get a lot of attention on the open market because of the lack of right shot defensemen there is this year. He gets a 3-year extension with an AAV of $3 million. It's a very fantastic pickup there. Jokiharju had 3 goals and 10 points in 60 games last year with the Bruins and the Sabres combined. Really solid season from Jokiharju. He's not going to put you up a whole bunch of points, but he's a very solid defensive-minded third pair defenseman. I think on a Bruins team that's trying to go through a transition into a younger type of team, I think Jokiharju staying around on a 3-year deal, $3 million, that's not a bad contract in my opinion for what Jokiharju can bring. So a very solid sign here from the Bruins as they send Jokiharju. And then we saw probably the biggest signing that we're going to talk about here today, and that was in the Islanders organization as RFA defenseman Alex Romanov, who a couple of years ago was acquired at the draft from the Montreal Canadiens, has been working quite well as like a solid top 4 defensive-minded shutdown defenseman. As a left shot defenseman, he's 25 years old. He gets an 8-year contract extension with the AAV of $6.25 million. That is a massive extension for a defensive-minded guy. This past year had 4 goals and 20 points in 64 NHL games. He's hit 20 points in each of the last 3 seasons, so he's not like he can't put up points. He can. He's just not the best at doing it. So, I mean, each of the 3 years he's been in New York, he's put up 20 plus points. He's had some really good defensive numbers. So, like, all in all, it's not a bad contract, but he goes from being like, what was it, $2 million, $3 million defenseman to a $6.25 million defenseman, and not a defenseman that's going to put you up a whole bunch of points. So, a little bit surprising there, in my opinion. I thought he probably would have gone around the $5 million mark at the very least, but he gets 6.25, and it's going to be with the New York Islanders for a long time. So, very interesting note there. But the New York Islanders have extended Alex Romanov. They've also extended Gauthier, and they've extended Foodie, all on new deals. Rathbone signs an extension in Buffalo, while Callahan, Jokiharju, DiPietro, and Beecher have all been given extensions by the Boston Bruins. So very interesting signing updates from the past couple of days. We do have one more trade update here to talk about. It was a very interesting one between the Detroit Red Wings and the Minnesota Wild. The trade is as follows. It's quite simple. The Wild acquire Vladimir Tarasenko from Detroit for future consideration. So for the Detroit Red Wings, makes complete sense. Tarasenko had a pretty bad season last year in Detroit. Didn't really fit well. He was making $4.75 million. They really wanted to get out of that contract. So getting nothing back isn't really overly bad. Getting out of the contract was the biggest thing for Detroit, and they free up $4.75 million in cap space. A lot more cap space now to work with. So for the Red Wings, it makes a whole bunch of sense. Even though they don't get anything back, it's a smart move there from Detroit to free up $4.75 million in cap space and move a middle 6 winger who is not fitting in overly well. When it comes to the Wild side, very interesting ad here. So Tarasenko's 33 years old. He's a right winger. He's won 2 Stanley Cups before, but he's got 1 year left at a $4.75 million cap hit. So for a cap strap team like the Minnesota Wild are, it's very quite surprising that Tarasenko does wind up going to this team. Tarasenko this past year had 11 goals and 33 points in 80 games, which wasn't an overly bad total, but I mean, the last few seasons he's been hitting 40, 50 points, so only 33 is not overly great. So hopefully a change of scenery going to Minnesota instead of being in Detroit. He gets a fresh start. He gets to play maybe top 6 minutes, and it could maybe play with a guy called Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, Matthew Boldy, and maybe he sort of finds that role that he had back a little while ago in teams like Ottawa, Buffalo, New York Rangers, and for the most part, St. Louis. So a very interesting trade here between the Wild and the Wings. But the Minnesota Wild have taken on the Vladimir Tarasenko contract for 1 more season, and the Red Wings get future considerations, but more importantly, almost $5 million in cap space. So very interesting trade here. And just one quick update here. There's been some talk about Toronto and Vegas maybe hooking up on a deal later. It might happen as soon as this video hits YouTube, but there's some talk that Vegas and Toronto were working on some sort of a sign-in trade with Marner. Elliot Freeman's mentioning that as he's hearing more and more about this, it might be a longer-term deal for Marner. Toronto wants to try and get something back. There's been some outlandish speculation that if Vegas signs Marner July 1st and there's no sign and trade, that Toronto's going to sort of try and accuse Vegas of tampering, even though they're sort of talking contract for a sign and trade. So it's quite surprising, all the little intricacies of that thing. I don't think Vegas would be fine for tampering, but I do think that Toronto wants to try and get at least something back. So it sounds like at this point, I got like Nicholas Roy, who's about to go on my end-to-end hockey trade bait list, and maybe some sort of a draft pick could be moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Mitch Marner, for Marner to maybe get the 8th year on his deal to the Vegas Golden Knights. So very interesting note there, but a very interesting concept, as it sounds like Marner to Vegas via a sign and trade could wind up happening at some point later today. So we shall see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What was your opinion on all these signings from Boston, the Islanders, and Buffalo? What was your opinion on the Minnesota-Detroit trade? And what was your opinion on Vegas and Toronto potentially hooking up on a Marner signing trade? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for tomorrow's live stream at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time, talking about free agency. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So remember to check that out. I'll link to that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.